I think that we will go ahead and get started. Feel free to keep putting your name and institution in the chat. Glad you guys are here, but Peter's going to kick us off and then I will steal the show later.
All right, sounds good. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today for our Migrating to Essential Scheduling. This is our second series this is our second webinar as part of this series. Today, we're going to be talking through elevated events and what that's going to look like to migrate over from Astra Schedule 8 over to our Essential Scheduling solution. And today, we're going to be focused on the events side of the house. So again, the purpose of this webinar series is to make sure you all know what you're getting with an essential scheduling migration. Make sure you understand what that project looks like and the process behind it, as well as some conversations about when should we be migrating. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So here's our agenda for today. So we're going to start with some welcome and some introductions. I'm sure you all are very familiar with Maggie, maybe not as much with me, but we'll start with the introductions here in just a minute. But we'll go through some housekeeping items, and then we'll also talk just a little bit about what is involved with a migration, why is it important that we move over, as well as when is the right time for us to move over as well. So we're going to talk through some of those things, and then we are going to jump into a product training, which Maggie's going to lead. And I did just see a question in the chat, will these recorded sessions be available after today? So yes, the answer to that is yes. We will be putting them in our support center, and we'll make sure to send out links to everybody that joined as well. So that product training portion, once we get to that point, Maggie's going to be leading us through the calendars and the events scheduling side of our new events software. So as she demos that, I do encourage everybody to be using the Q&A feature here in our Zoom link to be asking any questions that you all have. If you ask those questions in the chat, we might lose them. The chat tends to move pretty quick, so we want to make sure that we have everything documented. We're making sure to get everything answered throughout our call today. We are going to try to leave a little bit of additional Q&A time towards the end of our session as well, so that we can make sure that we get everything answered for all of the questions that are in the chat. If we do not get to everything today, as far as all of your questions, we will be sure to reach out afterwards and follow up with you. So we do ask within the Q&A feature that you do make sure that you're not in the anonymous mode when you're asking those questions, just so we know who you are and we can reach out afterwards as well. And then after that, we'll just talk through some next steps. So what do we have upcoming for our webinar series, as well as some additional pieces after today's webinar. So as far as introductions are concerned, so my name is Peter Carlson. I am a senior implementation consultant here at Astra. Been with the company for about 3 years now. I've worked with many of you that I've seen introducing themselves in the chat as well. So it's good to see everybody again. And I will be one of the few individuals that will be leading you through some of these migration projects. So as you guys are starting to think about that migration, you might be working with me again in the future. So I will pass it over now to Maggie to introduce herself as well.
Awesome. My name is Maggie Roberts. I am a client services advisor at Astra. You see me with lots of different titles, most likely. I started as an implementation consultant similar to Peter, working in Astra Schedule for 4 years, then did a little stint on our education team, then our marketing team, and now I'm back to working with clients as the client services advisor. I worked between onboarding support and client success, but one of my main focuses has been the migration project. So I've been at Astra for 7 years. I was a client before that for 2.5, working in the event scheduling software. So this is our time, events people. This is the stuff that we're going through, is stuff that I'm very excited about. I think a lot of you will also be very excited about it. And yeah.
All right, awesome. Okay, so the next few slides that we have here, I'm going to burn through these pretty quick. These might be duplicate slides to what you saw if you joined us for the last month's webinar, just talking about some logistics of the migration and what we're moving to and migrating. So I'm going to go through them pretty quick, just because I know that we have a lot of content that we need to get to in our product demo as well. But please, again, feel free to ask any questions in the chat as well. So what is essential scheduling? What are we talking about when we're talking about the migration from AS8 to essential scheduling? So essential scheduling is our kind of newer architecture solution, which is going to kind of be that replacement of Astra Schedule. And while we say it's a replacement of Astra Schedule, yes, you are getting a lot of the same features that you would have in Astra Schedule in a more kind of modern UI, but you're also going to get some additional pieces as well, such as historical demand forecasting, which we talked about in last month's webinar, as well as kind of a more sleek event tool with some good workflow processes and some other things like that as well. So as far as kind of the main pieces or deliverables, as far as the migration project is concerned, we're going to be able to provide you with some efficient academic scheduling. So talking about those kind of that historical demand forecasting that we're going to tie into your current academic scheduling process, allowing you to be able to make data-informed decisions about your schedule to make sure we're meeting our students' demands. Conflict-free scheduling, where we'll be able to, very similar to Astra Schedule, where we can look at where our sections and events are taking place and be able to schedule around those and be able to see what's available and how we're utilizing the space on our campus. We'll have centralized calendaring, which Maggie's going to showcase today, which again, going to be very similar to your Astra Schedule solution in the new event software. And then also event management and revenue. So Maggie's going to talk again through event management today. Revenue is kind of a new piece that's going to be kind of an add-on to what you have in Astra Schedule currently, which will be kind of around invoicing, registration, and payments. We're not going to talk about that today, but we do have in future webinars, we do have that plan to talk about that as well. And then these are the four main pillars of what we call essential scheduling. So again, as we just touched on, we have our academic scheduling. So very similar, kind of that one-to-one Astra Schedule, where you'll have the ability to make room assignment changes and be able to write that back to your student information system. We'll also have some additional pieces that will come with that as well, including the capability to actually manage your schedule, add sections, build out your whole schedule within this tool and send it back. However, I will say, although when you migrate, you will have all of those capabilities available to you, the migration project will be focused on that one-to-one relationship from Astra Schedule to Essential Scheduling. Now, if you are looking to add on the additional pieces, such as the schedule build, we would just ask that you get in touch with your client success lead to talk about that and what that might look like as far as the implementation is concerned. Then we also have the event scheduling and the room scheduling, like we discussed earlier as well. Again, very one-to-one with Astra Schedule, being able to pull up available spaces on our campus. And then you'll also be able to see that we'll have some faculty assignment capabilities as well, which we kind of, again, discussed in our last summit webinar as well. So why should I migrate? So first and foremost, newer architecture. So it is kind of a modern SaaS software that is more accessible, stable, and scalable, where we will be able to release features and bug fixes and products more reliably and rapidly. Again, not only are you getting more of a user-friendly UI, more of that kind of modern feel within the event solution and the academic solution, but we're also going to be able to make those adjustments and keep continuing to better the product day by day. So rather than kind of a big mass update where you're moving maybe from version 7 of Astra Schedule to version 8, we will be able to kind of have periodic product enhancements and bug fixes. Our development team is working daily to make sure that we can get you the best product that's best for everybody. Additionally, we also will have better integrations through some of more modern API structures that we have, including a lot of great documentation for setup behind those as well. Like I mentioned earlier, kind of that more intuitive user experience. It's got quicker and better performance, again, a sleeker design. So just a lot more user-friendly in that sense. And then also lastly, we have kind of just a single interface for this as well. So maybe rather than having to manage your events in one solution and then your academics in another solution, like maybe some of you in the chat right now have to do currently, once we migrate, everything will be in one spot. Our administrators will be able to manage permissions and roles all from the same spot, and our end users will be able to navigate just to one spot as well. As far as when you should migrate, so again, this is another conversation that you should be having with your client success leads at this time right now. Again, if you have not had this conversation with your client success lead up to this point, do be sure to make sure to reach out to them, as well as if you don't know who your client success lead is, please go ahead and submit a support ticket. We can make sure to get you in touch with them. So over here on the left-hand side here, we have what's currently available as of 2024. So as of right now, so you can see we have our essential scheduling, which comes with our academic event room, faculty assignments, as well as additional scheduling reports. Now you can also see that in 2025, that is when we're planning on releasing the room optimization and the final exam scheduling into our new solution as well. So that is on our roadmap. We are shooting for 2025 for that. So again, as you're having those conversations with your client success lead, if you really lean on room optimization and final exam scheduling pretty heavily in AstroSchedule right now might not be the best time to move, but maybe in 2025, once we have those features over, that might be an ideal time as well. You can also see over here on the right-hand side, we have the different student information systems that we're integrating with and kind of the plans that we have for both our imports as well as our section writebacks and room assignment writebacks. So you can see that we're investing very heavily in our integrations right now, where down the road, we want to make sure that no matter what student information system you all have the same capabilities. We all have an integration to support that. So you can kind of see where we're at right now with Banner and Colleague. We do have the capability to write back those room assignment changes, section changes via that Ethos API. And if you do need information about that Ethos API and that connection method, we can provide that to you as well. That is where we want to push all of our Ellucian clients to moving forward as well. And then you can kind of see where we're at with PeopleSoft, Workday, the additional student information systems, and where we're at with Writeback for those pieces as well. So again, just some conversations to start having with this roadmap, as well as internally within your teams to know when's the best time for us to move. All right, and then my last slide here, what is migrating from Astra Schedule over to our central scheduling? What are we going to do through that project? What is that going to look like? So a few things. First off, we're going to be taking all of your section data. Now, this section data will be through a new integration method, so we will have to have some IT resources involved as part of that project, and as far as that's concerned as well. But we'll be able to set up that section data to be importing in on a daily basis, and then we'll be able to set up kind of on-demand publishing or write back to your student information system as well. We're also going to be migrating over all of your room data. So we're going to be taking copies of what you have currently in Astra Schedule, moving that over again into our current solution, into the essential scheduling solution. With that as well, so as you're starting to think about when is the right time for me to move, again, since we are taking all that room data over from Astra Schedule, it might be worthwhile to do just kind of a room audit, make sure that everything is up to date in your Astra Schedule site as well before we kind of start that migration process. And then lastly, we are going to be pulling in current and future events, as well as events up to 1 year in the past. So again, if you joined us for our webinar last month, we did just have current and future events at that time. We have heard client feedback that it would also be beneficial to have that historical event data as well. So now we are going to be pulling in everything that's 1 year in the past, all the way up to your current and future events. So all of those will be coming through. We'll pull those over before we even start that migration process, kind of give us that starting point for our project. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Maggie so she can jump into our product demo today. And then, like I said earlier, please feel free to ask any of your questions in the Q&A feature. I'll make sure to try to answer anything that comes through. And if I can interrupt Maggie and ask those questions from the group too, I will.
Great. And can you see the event screen okay?
I can.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to do my best to not look at the Q&A and not look at the chat. Of course, you guys are going to have to see the side of my face because my camera's over here and this is over here, but I'll look over. Couple things that I wanted to add to what Peter was saying. Thank you for covering all of that, Peter. When you're thinking about migrating, also think about what am I doing today? I need to be able to do that in the new software. There are a lot of exciting new things. We are also open to building new things. You know that registrations and invoicing, while we're not talking about that today, that is a new exciting thing that's happening. But remember, for migrating, we just want you to get into the new platform when you're ready to do what you're doing now in the new platform within Essential Scheduling. So think about that when you're thinking about migrating your software over to the new one. Another thing to think about is we might say today, not yet, not yet. You know, we know that there are a lot of you that use every single aspect of Astra Schedule, and every single aspect of Astra Schedule has not been built yet. We don't plan to probably have everything completely built until next year, but we already have some migration projects that have started over the past month because they are using, you know, certain pieces of it that were already in the new platform and they were ready to go. So we remember to also think about that when thinking about migrating. Okay. Also, we're not going to be talking about requesting and workflow today because last time we almost killed Peter trying to get him to cover everything that we needed to. So we decided let's break it up. So this is a spoiler alert to a later slide, but in May we're going to have a webinar all about event requesting and workflow. So today we're just going to be talking about what it looks like to be a scheduler, what it looks like to use the calendar internally, things like that, which this is our calendar that we have. So just note that we're going to be talking more about those things. And then, like Peter said, registrations and invoicing will be a future webinar as well. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and jump in. I'm going to say a lot of, this is what it's like in Astra Schedule. This is where we are now. This is similar to your activity calendar that you have in Astra Schedule, and you can see it's just called calendar, right? So in here, you can easily click today. You can move forward to future dates, and you can pick a future date here, and it's going to show you a month view in this calendar view. The colors that we see here are what we call event categories, and we'll talk more about those when we open up an event and talk through things. But those are similar to what your event types were. So just like you could put calendar colors based on event types in Astra Schedule, you can do the same things with event categories. We also have different views within this calendar, similar to the activity calendar, where we have a week view. We also have a day view, and then we also have an agenda view. The agenda view is more of kind of like a list of events. You can easily see the statuses of those over here on the right-hand side if it's not scheduled, things like that. And you can also still see the colors of everything that we have here. This month view, I think, is going to be a very helpful view to be able to see what's happening on campus, and you can use it in different ways. We do have print capabilities for this particular calendar, so that's here if you need it. We also have a different coloring option. We had something similar to this, or have something similar to this in the scheduling grid around sections in Astra Schedule, but now we have one where you can color by some other fields. So you can color by booking status. So if you want to be able to see what's scheduled, what's requested, what's in a draft mode, things like that, quickly by color, you can do that. You can do it based off of certain tags, and we'll talk about what tags are, based on event owners, and then also based on space. Okay, so that's just a different way to filter. So we can see if I click booking status, we can see that the blue here is one status, and we have these other blues as these other statuses here. Okay. And I can easily reset and go back to just my event category colors. We also have within the timeline and calendar view, we have the show sections button. We are bringing in section data because we need to be able to have that conflict-free scheduling like Peter was talking about. And with this show sections button, now all you need to do is be able to click that, turn it on and off on if you want to see section data. Similar to Astra Schedule, seeing section data in this view is not super helpful, right? It's just a big long list on a certain day, and it's most likely not even going to load them all because there's so many. But you can filter down this calendar view. We, of course, have this nice big filter panel to be able to go in and say, what do I want to filter by? There's tags. Like I said, we're going to talk about tags. There's reference, which is just being able to type in something in a quick search. This task assigned to me is for things like approvers, which we'll talk about in a future webinar. You can easily filter by status, by those categories here. You can filter by people that are associated to the event, by booking owners, if there are any groups that you're using associated to an event. And then you can also filter by individual space. Right now, it's just one space. We don't have a building filter or a campus filter, but those are things that we know that we're going to need and that are planned to be worked on this year. Again, that's one of those examples. If you need to be able to filter by building and campus, maybe you should wait a little bit before you migrate, and that's totally okay. Okay, so these are our different filters that we have options for. So let's say you filter down to a single room. That's a great way to then click on that show sections button. It'll show you the sections associated to that room, as well as the events associated in that room. And then you can easily flip that off within that show sections button. Okay. One thing that's really great about this calendar is even though it looks very much like this is only going to be able to be viewed on a website, the whole events application is built mobile friendly and mobile first. meaning that everything you see can be used on a phone as well. You can go through and view a calendar. It looks very similar to like an Apple calendar. When looking at it, if you want to see an example of that, we have a great example of that on our website in a video. We can also send out some screenshots and things like that if needed. But it's very mobile friendly, very easy to use within a mobile device. And this calendar is the same way. You can click on a date and see all the events happening on that day. Okay. So those are this is our main calendar view, kind of that traditional calendar view. You could flip forward again, day, week view, agenda, things like that. One thing I want to point out real quick is up here in the top right corner is this little bell. If you've used our analytics tool, you'll have seen a notification bell like this before, like for registration notifications or being tagged on a section. This is similar. You can get notifications here within the application rather than necessarily get an email or a text message, which we do have as options now. But you can see like I'm associated to this onboarding training. And so I was given a notification that it had been relocated. Same with this untitled event that had been relocated because I was tagged as a guest on that event. So you can choose how you get your notifications. And this is one of the options is through that little notification bell here. Our other calendar view is the timeline view. The timeline view is basically the replacement of the scheduling grid. Peter showed last week that we have one of these on the academic side of the house as well, where you can see your sections very easily in that timeline view, and you can also even view instructors in a timeline view and things like that. This one's going to be more like the scheduling grid that we have in AstroSchedule, where you have your rooms on the left-hand side, what's happening in them on the right-hand side. We could see the classes here are in orange, and I can scroll through and see, where my white space is. I can also see where my events are scheduled, be able to hover over those, see more information about them. The section information can't be edited here. It has to be edited on the academic side of the house, which is what Peter showed last week, but it is constantly updated between the two for us to be able to see exactly what's happening on campus, as we can see here. So similar to scrolling through the scheduling grid, you're going to be scrolling through a timeline view. The day view is, I think, the most helpful. We do also have a week view where you can view the scheduling grid as a week, unlike how it was in AstroSchedule, where you can only see one room for a week. Now you can see all of your rooms for a week. This might be, helpful to some people, being able to quickly see, oh, look, there's nothing scheduled here. There's nothing scheduled on Thursdays, or I can maybe scroll back a little bit and see there's nothing scheduled on Tuesday, Thursdays in these rooms. We could see where the classes are. And then there's also a month view. The month view shows a lot of information. I know there are event schedulers out there who like views like this. So we have it in there available for you as well to be able to see, okay, here are quickly high level see there's nothing scheduled in this room from the 9th to the 21st, right? So we can see that information. And then of course you can come in and use that filter here as well. We also still have that hide and show sections button, and we have the color by options too. Okay.
Hey, Maggie.
Yeah.
There's a couple of questions in the chat just related to how these integrate with Google Calendar and with Outlook Calendar. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So the calendar that Peter showed last week on the academic side of the house, basically the software that we use for the calendar has Outlook and Google integration native to it. We just have to do some work to basically connect it to say, here's what we need in Astra to be able to send out these Google and Outlook calendar invites and things like that. So that is not something that is currently done, but it is on our roadmap to complete. There are a lot of other things that we want to complete first to be able to replace AstroSchedule completely, because as you guys know, there's a very basic Outlook integration with AstroSchedule, and that's it. Otherwise, it's just sending ICS files, and so that is work that's slated to be done, just not done yet. So we do have that coming within the roadmap. One thing to note too is anytime you get an email about an event in this new Astra events platform, there is an ICS file associated to it. So you're always going to have an ICS file, whether you get just a notification that you got a request or that your location has moved, right? If these were sent as emails instead, this onboarding training and untitled event would come to me as an email, and there would be an ICS file attached to it. So we're adding some things like that to where they're automatically attached, similar to sending out a calendar invite from the activity calendar or the scheduling grid. But actual Outlook and Google Calendar integration, slated but not complete yet.
Okay, and then one other question. I think the current week view that you're supposed to select the room, see the week view of that room, is that setup no longer needed?
Correct. So where you can go in and Astra schedule, you click a room, and then you could view that room for a week. Now, the place that I would probably do that is within the calendar. So if we go back to our calendar view, we could go to this week view here. This is showing everything that we have scheduled, but I could come in and filter to a specific space, and I'd be seeing just that room for the week. So that's the kind of that would basically be the same view. One thing that we don't have that we'd have in Astra schedule that's kind of similar on that week view is being able to say, I want to view the whole semester. So using that in date functionality. On the academic side, you can see that a little easier for like building, like visual schedule building. That's something we actually have slated to also build. That would be less of just viewing a room for a week and seeing what's available, and more being able to click and drag and move sections into different places for a whole semester, 8 weeks, things like that. So yeah, this is kind of the week view, kind of to answer that question, and then to add on that in-date functionality is something that'll probably come later with that visual scheduling. Cool.
Awesome. I guess one more for you then. On the calendar, we are now able to color code by enrollment, seat fill coloring, max enrollment, actual enrollment, and change the start time of the weekly scheduling grid. Will you be able to do those as well?
So we can't do the academic piece, but if that's something that you really like, I would definitely suggest submitting that to our roadmap. Peter can drop the link to that in the chat. If you guys don't have the link to that, I sent it like 16 times, I think, in our meeting last week. And if you've been to Aspire recently, you've heard me talk about it a lot. But that's a great place to put that. If it's also something you were like, we can't live without that, I would email your CSL and let them know, like, hey, we want to migrate, but we can't live without this thing. Those are things that our product team and our client success team want to know, so they know about your timeline of when you would want to migrate. The last half of that question, the first half was about that, and the second half was, changing the start and end time. That's not something you can do in here either right now, but if that's something that you're interested in, absolutely submit that as an enhancement request. Cool. Okay. So those are our two calendar views. Now I'm going to click on this events button and kind of talk through how events and bookings work. So as you guys know, in Astra Schedule, we have an event, and then we have all the meetings underneath, right? You always have to have an event, and then there are meetings underneath that include the date, the time, and the room. Also, resources can be associated to those meetings. You can add notes to those meetings. Setup and teardown can be added to those meetings, stuff like that. And then the event high level has like the name of the event. You can have a description at that level. That's where your event owner lives, things like that. We have something similar with events. We have events, but then we call them bookings. But bookings don't actually have to be associated to an event. You can just have a one-off booking, just like unlike an Astra schedule, you couldn't have a one-off meeting. You had to have an event and all the meetings. You can just have a one-off booking. You can also create a booking and then later be like, I actually need this to be associated to an event and associate it to a larger event. You can also have a larger event, have associated bookings, and decide, I actually need this to be separate and move it out of that event. So you can move things between bookings between events, out of an event to a new event. It's very flexible in that regard, which is really handy. The way we are going to migrate the data and the way that we have seen it come over is things are going to come over as events and as individual bookings, right? Because that's how they are now. They're events and meetings associated to that event. You can move those around once the data has been migrated over, but you don't have to build events moving forward in that way. Okay, so for example, if we can see here, this Sunflower 5K. This is an example of a 5K event that we have, and there's a student kid 5K, there's a Sunflower 5K adult check-in, Sunflower 5 5K just for adults. These are examples of different bookings associated to a larger event of Sunflower 5K. That's just like you could have homecoming and have um, your homecoming parade, your homecoming game, your homecoming alumni luncheon, all those different things, because you're going to be booking those in different spaces, right? So that's how you can also book those. You can click into an event very easily and see things that are associated, and you can associate things directly to just this event, right? So you have a reference number for an event. We'll see that that's also in a booking. You can also have a category associated to these. You have an owner, you have dates and times. So let's say homecoming, is the whole weekend. You can associate the whole weekend to homecoming. Same with this 5K, the check-in starts probably at 11 p.m. the night before, goes to the next day, or maybe there's a nighttime fun run type thing the night before. And then you can see the bookings that are underneath. You can see their status. You can see if they have a space assigned, things like that. And then any other details you can add. So you can actually add a space to the event. And this is something that's a little different as well, because you can add a campus or a building as a space to an event. So if you just want to tell somebody, hey, you know what, I'm going to create this event and I want to associate it to this specific campus, at the event level, you can do that. It doesn't have to be necessarily a room. It can be at the campus level. That's definitely a little different than what we have in Astra Schedule. Is pretty much that's all. You can book it at the room level. Okay. But then I can also come over here and I can click into the actual 5K booking. So we're going to talk through all of the fields here within the booking itself once it loads up for me, and be able to talk about what do we have available to us, what are the different pieces that we had in Astra Schedule that are coming in the new platform as well. All those different things we're going to see as well. Okay.
Maggie, while you're waiting on that to load, you
Yep.
might have answered this already, but is the Outlook integration going to be able to be two-way for changes?
I do not know the answer to that question yet. So once we build it, we will find out. Okay.
Perfect.
I'm going to go back to our calendar and pick an event over here because that one doesn't seem to be loading for me. So we're going to go ahead and pick this IT phone support event, and we're going to talk through this one. Okay. So I'm going to go through each piece. We're going to talk through what each piece is, kind of what it's associated to in Astra Schedule. And that's most likely where we're going to stop today because I can see Peter feverishly typing, and we want to make sure we get to all of your questions. I made a joke last time that I was going to have to type on 2 keyboards, and you guys threw so many questions at us that I literally wished that I could have typed on 2 keyboards. So I told Peter to be prepared, and he's killing it so far. So we have our event name here, and like I said, those event categories. Those categories are editable by admins. We're going to talk all about roles and security. That's next month's webinar, so be on the lookout for that. But there's lots of security options similar to how we have them in Astra Schedule, but they're not built in the same way. So I don't want to spend too much time on that today because we could have a whole webinar on that because we're going to, but that's something to look out for as well. So you can edit your event categories here. You guys are choosing what those are. We're going to migrate those over. We're not going to migrate any colors. You guys can go in and choose those once you've migrated the data. But those event types are going to come over with those event category into these event categories. We do have these reference numbers. So this would be what you would use as like the meeting reservation number. The reservation number in Astra Schedule, this is what we've added in, a booking reference number. And this one's a fun one because this was something that we had a couple clients talking about at Aspire when we showed, when we were going through our event sessions at our conference, and our developers put in this booking reference number maybe during that week or possibly the next week, adding in this booking reference number so people could have that, copy it, and send it where they need to. So that's a great reason to be on this platform is this platform changes. As an Astra Schedule person, that platform hasn't changed in a long time. This one's changing constantly. Even when I'm demoing, we see new things come up quickly all the time, which is very exciting. Okay. So we have our owner of the event. So if you go in and create the event, you become the owner. We also then have our statuses. We have scheduled, requested, draft, and canceled. Requested, of course, is when it comes in through a request form. Draft is when you first maybe click and drag. You can click and drag on a calendar to be able to create an event similar to what you can do in the scheduling grid. You can also do that on the timeline view, and it'll populate that room for you. You can also then, of course, go in and cancel an event, and then you can have one to be scheduled as well. Okay. We then also have publishing options, and there are a couple things here that I want to point out. One, everything defaults when you come in and create it to organization members, right? This is a Joe Schmo event. Faculty and staff can see it. Maybe students who can log in can see it, but we don't necessarily want it on the public facing calendar. If you want something on the public facing calendar, that's where you can use this published option, and that will send it to a public facing calendar, which I'm going to show you guys what that looks like as well today. If I forget for any reason, keep me honest, Peter. Pregnancy brain is a real thing. So then I also have private as an option where you can go in and mark an event as private. You can see that only the owner of the event can see that, either the owner or admins. Admins in the system have access to everything. You'll want to choose wisely who your admins are. Still have access to schedule anything, edit anything, view anything. So your admins have all the power. Okay. So those are your different share settings that you have around the calendar views and who can see what. We can then see that we have this repeat here, and up here we see this banner that says you're viewing a recurring event. Any change will affect all instances. We have a few things that can change as well that don't affect all instances, and actually it should give you a little pop-up that says, hey, do you want to change this on everything? But this is how we're creating recurring events. So it's similar to creating a recurring event in like Outlook or in Google or in Gmail. When you go in and create a recurring event, it gives you a recurrence pattern that you can create, right? So this is a great thing if you're going in and booking a standing meeting, right? A standing conference room meeting. You can just go in and book this, easily assign a room to it, and you're good to go moving forward. You can still make changes to individual instances if needed, but it's pretty much just, hey, here's when I need to make changes. Here's my event or my booking, and everything that I do is going to associate to the future bookings that I have. Right? Rather than having to go in and make changes to individual meetings like you would have to do an Astra schedule. Okay. We can also see you can mark an event as all day. So rather than having to pick midnight and go to 11:59 p.m. for a meeting, now you can actually book a meeting as all day, and it's going to book it for the whole day for you rather than having to go in and add those additional times. And then we also have setup and teardown. Rather than that being hidden within the meeting, having to add a setup and teardown window and or setup window or a teardown window like an Astra schedule, we now have this easy add setup and teardown button where all you have to do is type in the minutes that you need, 15 minutes before, 30 minutes after, and it will add in that setup and teardown time. And so this is where I was talking about assigning this booking to an event. So here are all my events that I have created. I could go in and associate this to one of these events that I already have created. So this is IT phone support. Let's say that we're going to have this is clearly a recurring meeting from 12 to 12:30. Let's say we're also going to have web support, and we're going to have carrier pigeon support, so if we want to set up those different options, but we want to put them all towards a larger support event, we could create an event called support and then associate these bookings to that event in order to be able to see them from that event list. Okay. And also once I associate one, I can then just hit the little X, as you can see here, and remove it from an event as well.
Hey,
and
Maggie,
then
we have we have just two questions in the chat that I saw around the same question.
Yeah.
Do we get to define what all day means, as in the start and end time?
No, right now it just means the full day, the full 24 hours.
Perfect.
We also have this select space option. So right now our select space option is just a drop down. So you can go in, it's similar to like when you go in to create a quick event. I guess they're not called quick events anymore. That was version 7. In AS8, it's just your single meeting that you're creating. Maybe when you click and drag or click add event in Astra schedule. When you're just doing a single date and time and filling out the rest of that stuff, you get a drop down to be able to see your rooms, and you can see whether they're available or unavailable. This is similar, right? Although in that one, you're only adding a room to one date and time. As we can see here, we can see partially available is an option for you to see conflicts. And if something was completely unavailable, we'd see that as well. Another thing we're seeing in while we're looking here is we can see addresses. So you can add addresses to rooms as well if needed. We can see the little people icon here is showing us the capacity. And of course, this is our campus building and room that we're seeing too. We're going to talk about rooms also in the foundational functionality meeting to be able to talk through all those different things. But this is where we have the drop down. We want to also have, similar to what we have on the academic side, a room selector where you can filter by, does it have this feature? Is it in this region? Regions, we're going to be using the functionality called tags. So does it have this tag? Does it have XYZ, whatever you needed there? That's going to be coming. But right now, it's just our drop down. Okay. One thing that's great, let's say I want to use Addison 185. Here we can see I can relocate this booking. So here's an example where I can say only this instance, all instances, ooh, that word is hard to say, all instances, and this and future instances. So if I want all of my instances of this to be in Colmar Addison 185, I can just hit confirm. And so now I've added Colmar Addison 185 to my event. Now, if there are multiple configurations for that space, I can come in and quickly pick a drop down to find a different configuration. This is a very big change from master schedule where you had to click about 6 different times in order to get to the different configurations to associate to a meeting within an event. Now it's just a quick, easy drop down, which is also something that is, spoiler alert, on the event request form, quick, easy drop down for someone to select. We can also see, because I'm in here as an admin, it automatically showed as approved. But if it's a room that someone else would need to schedule for me, it would go into a requested status and someone would have to approve the use of that space. And then of course we get this exciting little box here of add an additional space. And so this is where I could click add additional space and add another space to this booking. So just like bit different from master schedule, each meeting had to be added in order to have more spaces. Now you can just add spaces to bookings as much as you want. You can add 15 spaces here if you want to for this one individual piece rather than to have a whole bunch of bookings in order to have multiple spaces for an event. Okay. So if I also want Colmar Addison 193, maybe I only want it for this instance, I can confirm and just add Colmar Addison 193 for just this one space. Okay. Oh, if it will come in for me. I'll just do all instances and just go ahead and have that come in. Okay. And we can see that I can come in and choose different configurations for that one as well. And it's already going to show me that I'm the one that scheduled it. Okay. So we have our description, our expected attendance here. We also have attachments. And so this is where I can upload attachments to an event. You can make one a featured attachment. So if I click add attachment here, that's where it gives me my pop-up. But you can add in like an image for your event that can be shown as a featured image that can be on a public facing calendar. Because we're going to get this question, I'm going to go ahead and spoil again our webinar in May. During the request process, you can have your end users upload attachments and they can show up here as well from the request form into the event. That was a big ask that I got every single time I implemented an Astra schedule school on events. Peter's nodding his head because he also gets that question. So that's something that we added in, absolutely. You can then add resource. Oh, yep. Go ahead.
Sorry, Maggie.
No, that's okay.
Got a question in here. Does it give us the option to automatically reserve the space for a setup time if someone selects a configuration that is not the standard?
Great question. I know we can do that in Astra schedule. We cannot do that now in new platform. But if that's, again, same spiel. If it's something you really want, I would contact your CSL or submit a enhancement request around that. Right now, it's just adding in the setup and teardown time. Okay.
Awesome.
So we also have resources similar to Astra schedule. One thing I want to point out is resources are not currently migrating. That work is slated for Q2, which Q2 starts on next Monday. So I mean, that work is coming very soon. Even if you're starting contracting now, it'll probably be done by the time you're done with a contract. So just wanted to point that out, that we can or we will be migrating your resources that you already have in Astra Schedule. If they're associated to events, we're going to be moving those over sometime this year. Okay. But these are the resources that we have. It will count down, if you have an event at the same, excuse me, if you had an event at the same time where 50 of these chairs were already being used, it would show that only 200 were available, so on and so forth. Okay. Again, we want to have like a resource picker, a resource selector, but for now it's just the drop down. And then tags are a great way to just have additional categorization, right? So event meeting type, you can see there's nothing associated like that here, but tags, I would call that if you wanted to go in and add an additional category or additional way to flag this event, you could go in and do that. And then you can filter easily by these tags as well. Okay. Now, if somebody requests an event, they're going to be shown up here as a guest, but otherwise I can add guests to this event and I can add them as an individual, or I can add them as a group. So groups are going to be similar to customers in Astra Schedule. One thing we're not going to be migrating are the customers. We're just going to be migrating the contacts associated to events. So if you're using your customers very heavily, you'll see, I'm going to show groups real quick. I'm also watching my time. I want to make sure I don't go over any, but we do have groups available, and you're going to be able to group people together and just associate a group here. You can see we don't have to add in a customer contact to make sure we can save the event. And if they're not a customer contact, you have to go make them a customer contact. Done are those days, because we are done talking about it. And now you can just add a person. You can even add a person right here. If they're not in the system yet, you can throw their email address in and you can add them. So it's very flexible in that regard. But you can also, like I said, add groups, and then they can get those little notifications like I showed in that little notification bell. Okay.
Hey, Corey, I know you just had a question in there about people, customers, and contacts. I think Maggie just answered it, but let us know if that didn't get you what you need.
Yep. And I'm going to show groups again in a minute, so then I might answer some more questions. We also then have organizers of events. And organizers, if you're associated to an event as an organizer, you can see these organizer notes. And that's where, and you can add, again, the same, either a person or a group to this. And then we actually have a mobile view that's just for organizers. So when you go to an event and you're the organizer of it, you can see the details and see things pretty quickly on that for that event. So this is what I would associate like the traditional notes in Astra Schedule, right? Those were something that you put in so that they could really be on a report, right? This is what I would use these notes for, because like in the details page, this description is like a public facing description. We don't necessarily want people to see that Peter needs to bring the vacuum today, right? Those are the types of things that we would not want to add in. And then, like we said, registrations and payments are going to be covered in a future meeting or a future webinar. So those are the things that we can see within a booking. Those are the things that you guys have access to as schedulers to come in and edit, update. If there are things that you're not seeing here that you're like, oh my gosh, can't live without XYZ, again, email your CSL, put in a support ticket, submit that to the roadmap. Whichever way you feel comfortable submitting it to us, we want that feedback. Because again, we're planning to replace functionality. This isn't the same. When you moved from version 7 to version 8, you pretty much got a UI update with a couple extra things. This is a completely different software, and we're rethinking how events are scheduled. So you might say, I want to do this one thing exactly the same way. And that product team is great, and they come up with awesome solutions of, actually, we're probably going to do it this way because it's going to be more efficient for you. So be aware that that could be something that happens as well. Okay. So 2 more things I want to show before I make sure that we don't have any other questions that we need to answer. Well, I'll pause. Anything related so far yet, Peter?
No, I'm answering the last question we have.
Okay, great. So I'm going to close.
Actually, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
One just came in. I understand how we schedule single and recurring meetings. Do we still have multiple as an option for creating meetings?
Great question. Multiple is not currently an option. What you'd basically have to do is create an event and then create individual bookings with the multiple option. But that is something that we have on the roadmap to be able to create multiple meetings as well, or bookings. Need to switch over to bookings and not meetings. Okay.
Perfect.
Yep. So now I'm going to go into groups real quick and just show you that you can create something like this athletics department and you can add people to it. You can even add a manager to that group where they can come in and manage who's in here. You can upload an attachment and you can see like this one has an image with it. These groups can also be associated in permissions. This is again spoilers for next week's webinar. So there's also going to be things where like with our single sign-on, if somebody signs in as a faculty staff and your faculty staff OU within your Active Directory, we can pass that information over into Astra and they can come in the faculty staff group. And then you can give them permissions that way, or they can come into the student group. But then you can also create additional ones. So it's almost a merge of roles and groups together, which I think is really helpful because it seems like that should be a little bit how Astra Schedule works too, and it doesn't. So it's going to be combining a lot of that and streamlining a lot of that process, but that's more for next month where we're going to talk about that. There is also a way, because we're not bringing over customer contacts, there is this really great way to bulk import groups. So if you have a bunch of people already in the system, or you have people that are just users, but they're not in here necessarily in groups, we do have a template that you can download and easily fill out and say, okay, put all these people in these groups, and then they can be associated where they need to. Okay, so that's a good way to associate people in groups into events so they can get those notifications. I was thinking of this as a way where clients could have like the student organizations updated very easily through these groups if needed through this bulk import. And it just like when you click on this, it gives you the template and then you upload the template. So it's very easy and user friendly. Okay. Last thing I want to show is the public facing calendar. So we're going to talk more about this organization settings next month. Peter's going to talk through the academic side of the house, and then I'm going to talk you guys through the event side. We're going to cover as much as we can. But one thing I want to show is this publishing option. This is the public facing calendar, and we have an iframe code, just like the activity calendar, except we're not embedding this calendar. This is like internal only type of calendar. Instead, we have this public facing calendar that can be published and ready for you externally, right? So we have it here. You can also then use the iframe code to put it on a website. You can see it made with this little window. It looks very nice in this little space. You can go in and choose different categories, and you can choose which categories are public. You can switch to a calendar view, which does look like that more traditional view. But this one's more of like a, here's what we have happening on campus type thing. You can click into the event. This is where, spoiler alert, you can register, things like that once you get that. Okay, that was what I wanted to make sure to cover today. You guys are probably like, where's all my event requesting? Where's my workflow? Like I said, it's coming. Stay tuned for our May webinar. I think it's literally the day after my birthday. So that's going to be really fun. Birthday present for me for us to talk about event workflow. But yeah, let me know, are there questions that we need to answer, Peter, before we wrap up, before we go back to the PowerPoint?
There was just one that just came in. Will we have the ability to pull reports on any required field, i.e. number of attendees? Will there be alcohol, et cetera?
Great question. So event reporting is something we are currently building. We have data that we're ready to pull into a report. And if there are certain fields that you want in a report, then that's something that you should put in an enhancement request. Our goal first is to replace most of the reports that we have in Astra Schedule. Now I say that, a lot of the reports are the same report, just with different parameters and filtered in different ways. With our new reporting software, it's not Chris reports. With our new reporting software, that can be one report and then you can do whatever you want with it. So it's going to look like less reports, but they're going to be better, bigger reports. We're going to take what we have in Astra Schedule now and reflect it, but then we'll have options to have more reporting. Custom reporting is something that we also want to have. That work probably isn't slated till later in this year. So if you're heavy on custom reporting, that might be more of a 2025 migration. So things like that. That's kind of where we are with our event reporting. And I'm hoping to show more of that in our future webinars too.
Perfect. Okay. Still have some questions around reporting in the chat. What tool are we using? Are you still building section reports? And what is the performance when loading a report?
Sure. So the tool that we're going to be using is AWS's QuickSight. So that's the reporting tool that you can expect to see, but it's going to be embedded into our software similar to how Krista Reports was with Astra Schedule. I already forgot the other two questions.
Are you still building section reports,
Oh,
and
yes.
what is the performance when loading?
The performance is great. It loads really quickly. That's what we've seen. We also, I would say, reference webinar from last month. Peter walked through the academic reports, or some of those.
Awesome.
Great. Okay, I'll stop
I'll
sharing
sounds good.
and let you finish up with the PowerPoint.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so just as far as next steps are concerned, so I think we got through some of that additional Q&A. Keep throwing them in the chat if you'd like to. Again, we can follow up if we don't get to everything today. But just wanted to talk about a few upcoming webinars that we have. So on April 23rd, we're going to talk about foundational functionality. That's going to be in reference to the setup, kind of the admin side of the house, so making sure that everything is configured appropriately, going through some of those back-end pieces of the settings. And then on May 28th, we're actually extending out our webinar series so that we can include another one revolving around event workflow. Again, as Maggie mentioned earlier, we thought it would be a lot of material to try to put into one hour webinar today. So that's why we split those up. So be looking forward
Clearly,
to
I wouldn't
that.
have gotten to it.
Exactly. So be looking forward to that on May 28th. Be ready to say happy birthday to Maggie at that time as well. And then last thing too, just wanted to put in another plug for our space station. So the space station, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of what it is, but that is going to be our customer community where you can network with peers. You can see how they're using things, what kind of best practices we have for how they might be using our software and our tools. This is also where you can give product feedback. So I dropped in the roadmap channel, but you can also go through the space station as well to submit product feedback there. And then we also have a lot of great rewards, that you can win through participation in different challenges that we have. If you want some super cool Ad Astra socks or some other cool swag, we've got that all available there too. And that is the rest of it. So like I said, it looks like there's still maybe a few questions in the chat.
Well, a couple of them, I think we can answer both of them real quick. The reporting tool and being able to customize, like I said, we don't know what customizing reports looks like yet. Stay tuned for what that looks like, Michelle. You can click answer live on those. And then to your question, Renee, we don't have that as part of a filter of like searching for a room for an event yet, but that is coming. But room features are available within a room itself, and we'll be talking more about those in our webinar next month. So the webinar next month, like Peter said, is going to be about security. Security and rooms are probably the biggest things we're going to talk about because that's where you guys have a lot of questions, which is really great. So we'll talk about that for your academics as well as for your events. Okay, great. If you're registered for this webinar, you should be registered for all three. If for any reason you aren't, feel free to go back to that same page and register for the webinar the May webinar. The May webinar is an extension. Once we get those built in our system, we're going to automatically register you for the next three. May is going to be event requesting, and then June and July are going to be our add-ons with schedule building and registration and invoicing. So you should be able to get that automatically, but otherwise it'll be in that same website page. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. I know we probably talked fast. That's why we record this, so we can send out the recording and you can look through that again. I did post in the chat way earlier that we do have the webinar from last month in the knowledge base and has some Q&A at the bottom too that you can go and look at. We're going to be doing the same with this one as well, but it'll also be emailed out to you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. You guys have a great rest of your day. See you next month.